Alright, so this is probably gonna be the laziest video I've ever made. And I always hate that I start on these videos with so. That's my bad. I feel like that's always a proper way to introduce myself, but it's really not. So, and there it is again. Um, I just wanted to talk about something that was just on my mind, like in the past, not even 5 minutes, like three. And that is American education, specifically speaking towards history and I guess ethics as well. But mostly how history is very Eurocentric. And I kind of just wanted to talk about my experiences and the experiences I've heard from my brother and perhaps a few other friends, but I'm mostly going to be citing my brother. Um, to start off with, my freshman year, I took AP World History. And it was great. I really loved it to see all of history, but I feel like I didn't really see all of it. It was still very Eurocentric. It had this big emphasis on what Europe was doing. And when we focus in on other nations, it's usually just, or, other continents like Asian history, for example. It was mostly when you know, Westerners impacted their history. Um, so let's start with industrialization and having a big focus on Japan, since they were one of the first, or they were the first Asian um, nation to industrialize. Or how about the focus on China with well, also industrialization, but also the Opium Wars. Obviously, that's a war with the British, and so on and so on. Like, it seemed like we only focused on other nations when they either impacted European nations or European nations impacted them. And you know, I never really saw like some sort of connection between Latin America and Asia, or Asia and Africa, or Africa and Latin America. It was always somehow connecting back to Asia, or I'm sorry, not Asian, European history. And I was really pissed off when it came to, we usually learned um, about like a certain civilization every week. And when it came time to learn about one of my favorite civilizations to study and research, the Aztecs, we only spent like 2 days on it. We didn't have like 2 or 3 days. And to be fair, it was like, I don't know, I think it was a snow day and there was already like a holiday somewhere in between there. So like there wasn't much that could be done about it. But I wasn't, but we weren't sent any extra material to read. We weren't quizzed as hard on my favorite subject area, or my favorite civilization, as we were compared to other nations. Now, I will admit that only happened with probably like two civilizations, the Aztecs and mm, it might have been one European nation, um, towards probably like the end of feudalism, but it was mostly talking about feminism, and obviously that gets skipped over because I mean schools just don't really care about feminism. That's just a fact. So yeah, I was really pissed, and that leads me on to the like kind of like the core, not really core, um, but the normal history class that people took, um, and it kind of shocked me because it was very Eurocentric, more Eurocentric than my AP history class. My So according to my brother, um, the teacher taught for a whole semester, so half of the school year, um, the Renaissance. Because according to him, that was the most important point in all of history. There are lots of important points in all of history, and I don't think one just becomes the most. They all play crucial factors, but I don't see the Renaissance exactly being the most, you know, game changing moment in all of history. Why is it not? well, you can say it did impact, the Americas, but also the discovery of the Americas also impacted the Renaissance itself, since it was coming out of the Dark Ages, which, in my opinion, aren't really that dark, and into the scientific revolution and probably industrial revolution, if I'm correct. I may be wrong on that. But it wasn't just that, there were other important points in history, and the Renaissance was definitely important. I'll give it that, but not too important, so that it wasn't that important for you to have such a diverse school and such a diverse classroom. Because yeah, we do go to a diverse school and we have diverse classrooms of people with people of different ethnicities and probably different languages and different cultures. So why have it be so Eurocentric? That to me was the greatest insult to diversity, to spend half a school year on things that may not directly relate to all of us. They also learned about Aztec history, and that lasted about 2 weeks, which was even better than my situation, because they did have a lot more time to go in depth with things. So that's one thing I don't really like about world history, is that it wasn't too specific, but at the same time, it wasn't too linear. And it had a more global view. And I mean that more spiritually than I do. I only know how to say like linearly and globally, but like it was more spiritual than more just like, straight up with the facts. But, anyways, Aztec history in the normal history class. I later asked my brother a few questions to see if anything was different from his education, um, from my research. And he couldn't even answer, or he didn't know why Cortez was allowed into the Spanish Empire upon meeting the Tlatoani, which means king, in Nahuatl, Montezuma. Um, so, he didn't really understand that meeting because they didn't break it down. So if he didn't have enough time to break it down, why not have the class for 3 weeks? The thing is, they don't really care about exploring all those different histories that, connect us to our roots. I as a Mexican, researched Aztecs purely because they are my roots. They are the practically the root of Mexican history. And that symbol that's on the Mexican flag is impacted by Aztec mythology. So it is important as a Mexican to at least know some of the basics of our indigenous people who live in Mexico. And the Aztecs are definitely an important step towards that. And my brother just didn't learn. He learned very linear facts like dates and who painted this and who painted that during the Renaissance period, but he can't tell me why Cortez was allowed into the Aztec Empire or the Aztec capital. That is much more important than a painting. The destruction of an empire is much more important than who painted this, and that, and on which date. I think you can see the problem here. History in public schooling is very Eurocentric and does not focus on the students' individual histories and their backgrounds. The final thing I kind of just want to mention is that I went to a charter school for my middle school years. Sixth, I can't say that right. It sounds like I have a lisp. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And history was awesome. We learned about Japanese internment camps. We learned about the Bracero programs. We learned about the Russian Revolution. It was a much more progressive curriculum than what I got in high school. Um, Now, please let me know what you learned in middle school, but that's the stuff I learned. The harsh working conditions. Oh, and the Indian schools as well. We learned about that and how traumatic they were. But yeah, we learned about all of those things, and it felt like we did spend a good amount of time on them. I remember we also learned about the Alamo and the stolen land from Mexico, so California to Texas and all the land in between. Um, I remember one of the assignments was write a letter to like the leader of the time. I don't remember what exactly it was. It was kind of like, I don't remember, but it was a fun assignment, and it was something that was really engaging compared to public schooling, which really, really sucks. Because it's just take this quiz and you'll pass, you'll get a grade, but you're not going to engage so much with this subject. I got to engage with a lot, especially as a Mexican myself. It was really cool to learn about the Bracero program and really cool to later learn that my great grandfather was actually part of the Bracero program and is the reason why my family is in the United States today. Um, Along with the Alamo and how that impacted Mexican American history. Again, learning about that spoke to me and my roots. And I don't mind learning about African history. I don't mind learning about Asian history. And I don't mind learning about European history. The problem is that in public schooling, it's very Eurocentric. It's very just, if it impacted Europe, then it's important. And here's this other part of the world that, we'll consider small because it did not impact Europe. And we won't focus as much on it, even though it's the destruction of an empire compared to, um, you know, a European painting. So that is my problem with public schooling and the way history is taught. And it's one of the reasons why I want to become a history teacher. But unfortunately, I'm going to be stuck to a curriculum if I decide to go into public school. And I just don't want to be tied down to teaching something so Eurocentric and not engaging with the people I'm teaching. If I was teaching Japanese students, or at least like 15% of my class was Japanese, then yeah, let's talk about the Japanese internment camps. Yeah, let's talk about, well, I can't even name that much because school has not taught me Japanese history. They only taught me Japanese history when it connects to American history. So there's a lot to discover there and there's a lot to talk about. Um, but definitely there's a lot to research, and school is not going to put in the effort for us. And the only way we can learn about it is putting in the effort ourselves. But then what's the point of school?